Welcome to Sunday School for Sunday, July 23rd, 2023, for our junior high students, ages 12 to 14. I do not own the rights to this music. The title of today's story, The Turn Around. James, an eighth grader who hung out with the wrong crowd, began to see his grades drop. James and his mother met with his teacher at a parent-teacher conference and discussed possibly holding him back a year. As his teacher talked about his absences and poor test scores, James looked over at his mother and could see the disappointment in her eyes. On the ride home, his mother talked about how she wanted the best for him and encouraged him to try to bring his grades up. She offered her support and help so his grades would get better. That night, James began to reflect on his life and thought about how he always wanted to become a police officer. He knew that if he continued his negative behavior, he would not only disappoint his mother, but also fail his dream of working for his city's police department. He only had 1 quarter to bring his grades up and was determined to do so. He was assigned a tutor and began studying for his end of course and end of grade tests. He began to pray for strength, courage, and wisdom. Strength to make it through each day, courage to face his peers, and wisdom to pass his test. He dedicated 100% of his time to his studies. He submitted all of his assignments and prepared for his end of course tests. Growing nervous as his test day approached, he prayed to God to give him peace. Immediately, he felt a calm reassurance. He completed all of his assignments and tests. Weeks later, when his mother opened his report card, tears began to fill her eyes. James passed the 8th grade. She expressed how proud she was, gave him a big kiss, and encouraged him to keep up the good work. The memory verse for today's lesson. So we fasted and besought our God for this, and he was entreated of us. And that's Ezra chapter 8, verse 23. The lesson scripture is Ezra chapter 8, verses 21 through 23. Then I proclaimed a fast there at the river of Ahava, that we might afflict ourselves before our God, to seek of him a right way for us, and for our little ones, and for all our substance. For I was ashamed to require of the king a band of soldiers and horsemen, to help us against the enemy in the way, because we had spoken unto the king, saying, The hand of our God is upon all them for good that seek him, but his power and his wrath is against all them that forsake him. So we fasted and besought our God for this, and he was entreated of us. Fasting and praying. Ezra knew the people's journey was uncertain and needed the assurance of God's presence and protection. Ezra did not want to diminish his witness to the king about God's graciousness to them. Dependence on God may mean denying our natural inclinations. God's people should be confident in seeking his protection and safety through prayers. Ezra was specific about why they were fasting and praying. God answered their prayer and protected them. How to understand fasting. Number 1, read the full context of the scripture passage. This may require reading of preceding chapters. Number 2, know that sometimes believers must fast and pray for God's protection. Number 3, desire to fast and pray. And number 4, ask yourself what fasting and praying mean to you based on everything you have read and know. As people journey through life, they pause to assess their strengths and weaknesses. Ezra and his entourage stopped on their way to Jerusalem to prepare themselves by fasting and praying for God's protection. In the lesson today, James identified that he needed to bring his grades up. He was able to identify that his weaknesses were brought out because he hung with the wrong crowd. It helped him understand that if he continued to go down that destructive path, he might not pass to the next grade. His strengths were brought out because he was able to change for the better. How might James's life have turned out had he continued to hang with the wrong crowd? Have you ever found yourself making decisions that made you assess your strengths and weaknesses? Speak with an elder and ask them about any experiences related to fasting and praying. Think about any upcoming situations or events where you may find yourself fasting or praying. Write down responses of both the elder and yourself and share with your class. The Bible readings for this week. Monday, the topic is humbly calling on God. Read 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verses 12 through 18. Tuesday, the topic is beseeching God's answer to prayer. Read Psalms chapter 69 verses 9 through 18. Wednesday, the topic is humble and contrite in spirit. Read Isaiah chapter 66 verses 1 through 4. Thursday, the topic is fasting directed to God. Read Matthew chapter 6 verses 16 through 18. Friday, the topic is studying and keeping the law. Read Ezra chapter 7 verses 1 through 10. Saturday, the topic is securing servants for the temple. Read Ezra chapter 8 verses 15 through 20. And on Sunday, the topic is praying for God's protection. Read Ezra chapter 8 verses 21 through 23. The end. God bless you and thank you for joining me today.